Here I am. I was just double checking. It feels like it's been so long since I did this that I just forgot how to everything. So let me just, yes, I have opened what I'm going to read to you. I think I may have bitten off a little bit more than I can chew, but let's find out. So this is affection, and it's a part of the 4 loves. And this is the very first part that Lewis begins to disseminate for us. So I'm going to jump into it because it may take a while, and I have another thing that I have to do at 8, but I can be late if need be. So, no, I'm not at the top of the page. Don't be ridiculous. Why would you ask? Oh, shucks. Shizzle. Right, no, that's still the wrong one. Okay, if you just talk among yourselves, I'm going to edit this bit out, that's for sure. No, right. I feel myself blushing. This is ridiculous. Okay. I feel like a novice. Like a teenager who's just worked it out. Oh, how long is this book? Okay. Here we go. Thank goodness. Right, so I'm just going to have to speak as if I'm just starting. Right, welcome. This is Affection from me and from C.S. Lewis. So here we go. I begin with the humblest and most widely diffused of loves, the love in which our experience seems to differ least from that of the animals. Let me add at once that I do not on that account give it a lower value. Nothing in man is either worse or better for being shared with the beasts. When we blame a man for being a mere animal, we do not mean that he displays animal characteristics, for we all do, but that he displays these and only these on occasions where the specifically human was demanded. When we call him brutal, we usually mean that he commits cruelties impossible to most real brutes. They're not clever enough. The Greeks called this love storge. I shall here call it simply affection. My Greek lexicon defines storge as affection, especially of parents to offspring, but also of offspring to parents, and that, I have no doubt, is the original form of the thing, as well as the central meaning of the word. The image we must start with is that of a mother nursing a baby, a bitch or a cat with a basketful of puppies or kittens, all in a squeaking, nuzzling heap together, purrings, lickings, baby talk, milk, warmth, the smell of young life. The importance of this image is that it presents us at the very outset with a certain paradox. The need and need love of the young is obvious. So is the gift love of the mother. She gives birth, gives suck, gives protection. On the other hand, she must give birth or die. She must give suck or suffer. That way, her affection too is a need love. There is the paradox. It is a need love, but what it needs is to give. It is a gift love, but it needs to be needed. We shall have to return to this point. But even in animal life, and still more in your own, affection extends far beyond the relation of mother and young. This warm comfortableness, this satisfaction in being together, takes in all sorts of objects. It is indeed the least discriminating of loves. There are women for whom we can predict few wooers, and men who are likely to have few friends. They have nothing to offer. But almost anyone can become an object of affection. The ugly, the stupid, even the exasperating. There need be no apparent fitness between those whom it unites. I have seen it felt for an imbecile, not only by his parents, but by his brothers. It ignores the barriers of age, sex, class, and education. It can exist between a clever young man from the university and an old nurse, though their minds inhabit different worlds. It ignores even the barriers of species. We see it not only between dog and man, but more surprisingly, between dog and cat. Gilbert White claims to have discovered it between a horse and a hen. Some of the novelists have seized this well. In Tristram Shandy, my father and Uncle Toby are so far from being united by any community of interests or ideas that they cannot converse for 10 minutes without cross purposes. But we are made to feel their deep mutual affection. So with Sancho Panza, Pickwick and Samuela, Dick Swiveller and the Marchioness. So too, though probably without the author's conscious intention, in The Wind in the Willows. The quaternion of mole, rat, badger and toad suggests the amazing heterogeneity possible between those who are bound by affection. But affection has its own criteria. Its objects have to be familiar. We can sometimes point to the very day and the hour when we fell in love or began a new friendship. I doubt if we ever catch affection beginning. To become aware of it is to become aware that it has already been going on for some time. The use of old or vieux as a term of affection is significant. The dog barks at strangers who have never done it any harm and wags its tail for old acquaintances, even if they never did it any good. The child will love a crusty old gardener who has hardly ever taken any notice of it and shrink from the visitor who is making every attempt to win its regard. But it must be an old gardener, one who has always been there. The short but seemingly immemorial always of childhood. Affection, as I have said, is the humblest love. It gives itself no airs. People can be proud of being in love or of friendship. Affection is modest, even furtive and shamefaced. Once, when I had remarked on the affection quite often found between cat and dog, my friend replied, "Yes, but I bet no dog would ever confess it to the other dogs." That is at least a good caricature of much human affection. "Let homely faces stay at home," says Comus. Now, affection has a very homely face. So have many of those for whom we feel it. It is no proof of our refinement or perceptiveness that we love them, nor that they love us. What I have called appreciative love is no basic element in affection. It usually needs absence or bereavement to set us praising those to whom only affection binds us. We take them for granted. And this taking for granted, which is an outrage in erotic love, is here right and proper up to a point. It fits the comfortable, quiet nature of the feeling. Affection would not be affection if it was loudly and frequently expressed. To produce it in public is like getting your household furniture out for a move. It did very well in its place, but it looks shabby or tawdry or grotesque in the sunshine. Affection almost slinks or seeps through our lives. It lives with humble undress, private things, soft slippers, old clothes, old jokes, the thump of a sleepy dog's tail on the kitchen floor, the sound of a sewing machine, a gollywog left on the lawn. But I must at once correct myself. I am talking of affection as it is when it exists apart from the other loves. It often does so exist, often not. As gin is not only a drink in itself, but also a base for many mixed drinks. So affection, besides being a love itself, can enter into the other loves and colour them all through and become the very medium in which from day to day they operate. They would not perhaps wear very well without it. To make a friend is not the same as to become affectionate. But when your friend has become an old friend, all those things about him, which had originally nothing to do with the friendship, become familiar and dear with familiarity. As for erotic love, I can imagine nothing more disagreeable than to experience it for more than a very short time without this homespun clothing of affection. That would be a most uneasy condition, either too angelic or too animal, or each by turn, never quite great enough or little enough for man. There is indeed a peculiar charm, both in friendship and in eros, about those moments when appreciative love lies, as it were, curled up asleep, and the mere ease and ordinariness of the relationship, free as solitude, yet neither is alone, wraps us round. No need to talk, no need to make love, no need at all, except perhaps to stir the fire. This blending and overlapping of the loves is well kept before us by the fact that at most times and places, all three of them had in common, as their expression, the kiss. In modern England, friendship no longer uses it, but affection does, and eros does. It belongs so fully to both that we cannot now tell which borrowed it from the other, or whether there were borrowing at all. To be sure, you may say that the kiss of affection differs from the kiss of eros, yes, but not all kisses between lovers are lovers' kisses. Again, both these loves tend, and it embarrasses many moderns, to use a little language or baby talk. And this is not peculiar to the human species. Professor Lorenz has told us that when jackdaws are amorous, their calls consist chiefly of infantile sounds reserved by adult jackdaws for these occasions. We and the birds have the same excuse. Different sorts of tenderness are both tenderness and the language of the earliest tenderness we have ever known, and recalled to do duty for the new sort. One of the most remarkable byproducts of affection has not yet been mentioned. I have said that it is not primarily an appreciative love. It is not discriminating. It can rub along with the most unpromising people. Yet, oddly enough, this very fact means that it can in the end make appreciations possible which, but for it, might never have existed. We may say, and not quite untruly, that we have chosen our friends and the woman we love for their various excellencies, for beauty, frankness, goodness of heart, wit, intelligence, or whatnot. But it had to be the particular kind of wit, the particular kind of beauty, the particular kind of goodness that we like, and we have our personal tastes in these matters. That is why friends and lovers feel that they were made for one another. The especial glory of affection is that it can unite those who most emphatically, even comically, are not. People who, if they had not found themselves put down by fate in the same household or community, would have had nothing to do with each other. If affection grows out of this, of course it often does not, their eyes begin to open. Growing fond of old so-and-so, at first simply because he happens to be there. I presently begin to see that there is something in him after all. The moment when one first says, really meaning it, that though he is not my sort of man, he is a very good man in his own way. That moment is one of liberation. It does not feel like that. We may feel only tolerant and indulgent, but really we have crossed a frontier. That we say in his own way means that we are getting beyond our own idiosyncrasies, that we are learning to appreciate goodness or intelligence in themselves, not merely goodness or intelligence flavoured and served to suit our own palate. Dogs and cats should always be brought up together, said someone. It broadens their minds so. Affection broadens ours. Of all natural loves, it is the most catholic, the least finical, the broadest. The people with whom you are thrown together in the family, the college, the mess, the ship, the religious house, are from this point of view a wider circle than the friends, however numerous, whom you have made for yourself in the outer world. But having a great many friends, I do not prove that I have a wide appreciation of human excellence. You might as well say I prove the width of my literary taste by being able to enjoy all the books in my own study. The answer is the same in both cases. You chose those books. You chose those friends. Of course they suit you. The truly wide taste in reading is that which enables a man to find something for his needs on the sixpenny tray outside any second-hand bookshop. The truly wide taste in humanity will similarly find something to appreciate in the cross-section of humanity whom one has to meet every day. In my experience, it is affection that creates this taste, teaching us first to notice, then to endure, then to smile at, then to enjoy, and finally to appreciate the people who happen to be there. Made for us? Thank God, no. They are themselves odder than you could have believed and worth far more than you could have guessed. And now we are drawing near the point of danger. Affection, I have said, gives itself no airs. Charity, said St. Paul, is not puffed up. Affection can love the unattractive. God and his saints love the unlovable. Affection does not expect too much, turns a blind eye to faults, revives easily after quarrels. Just so charity suffers long and is kind and forgives. Affection opens our eyes to goodness we could not have seen or should not have appreciated without it. So does humble sanctity. If we dwelled exclusively on these resemblances, we might be led on to believe that this affection is not simply one of the natural loves, but is love himself, working in our human hearts and fulfilling the law. Were the Victorian novelists right after all? Is love of this sort really enough? Are the domestic affections, when in their best and fullest development, the same thing as the Christian life? The answer to all these questions, I submit, is certainly no. I do not mean simply that these novelists sometimes wrote as if they had never heard the text about hating wife and mother and one's own life also. That, of course, is true. The rivalry between all natural loves and the love of God is something a Christian dare not forget. God is the great rival, the ultimate object of human jealousy, that beauty, terrible as the Gorgons, which may at any moment steal from me, or it seems like stealing to me, my wife or husband's or daughter's heart. The bitterness of some unbelief, though disguised even from those who feel it as anti-clericalism or hatred of superstition, is really due to this. But I am not at present thinking of that rivalry. We shall have to face it in a later day. For the moment, our business is more down to earth. How many of these happy homes really exist? Worse still, are all the unhappy ones unhappy because affection is absent? I believe not. It can be present, causing the unhappiness. Nearly all the characteristics of this love are ambivalent. They may work for ill as well as for good. By itself, left simply to follow its own bent, it can darken and degrade human life. Excuse me. The debunkers and anti-sentimentalists have not said all the truth about it, but all they have said is true. Symptomatic of this, perhaps, is the odiousness of nearly all those treacly tunes and saccharine poems in which popular art expresses affection. They are odious because of their falsity. They represent as a ready-made recipe for bliss and even for goodness what is in fact only an opportunity. There is no hint that we shall have to do anything, only let affection pour over us like a warm shower, bath and all. It is implied we'll be well. Affection, we have seen, includes both need love and gift love. I begin with the need, our craving for the affection of others. Now, there is a clear reason why this craving of all love cravings easily becomes the most unreasonable. I have said that almost anyone may be the object of affection, yes, and almost everyone expects to be. The egregious Mr. Pontifex in The Way of All Flesh is outraged to discover that his son does not love him. It is unnatural for a boy not to love his own father. It never occurs to him to ask whether, since the first day the boy can remember, he has ever done anything or said anything that could excite love. Similarly, at the beginning of King Lear, the hero is shown as a very unlovable old man, devoured with a ravenous appetite for affection. I'm driven to literary examples because you, the listener, and I do not live in the same neighbourhood. If we did, there would unfortunately be no difficulty about replacing them with examples from real life. The thing happens every day, and we can see why. We all know that we must do something, if not to merit, at least to attract erotic love or friendship. But affection is often assumed to be provided ready-made by nature, built in, laid on the house. We have a right to expect it. If the others do not give it, they are unnatural. This assumption is no doubt the distortion of a truth. Much has been built in because we are mammalian. Instinct will provide at least some degree, often a high one, of maternal love. Because we are a social species, familiar association provides a milieu in which, if all goes well, affection will arise and grow strong, without demanding any very shining qualities in its objects. If it is given us, it will not necessarily be given us on our merits. We may get it with very little trouble. From a dim perception of the truth, many are loved with affection far beyond their deserts. Mr. Pontifex draws the ludicrous conclusion, therefore I, without desert, have a right to it. It is as if on a far higher plane we argued that because no man by merit has a right to the grace of God, I, having no merit, am entitled to it. There is no question or rights in either case. What we have is not a right to expect, but a reasonable expectation of being loved by our intimates, if we and they are more or less ordinary people. But we may not be. We may be intolerable. If we are, nature will work against us. For the very same conditions of intimacy which make affection possible also, and no less naturally, make possible a peculiarly incurable distaste, a hatred as immemorial, constant, unemphatic, almost at times unconscious, as the corresponding form of love. Siegfried in the opera could not remember a time before every shuffle, mutter and fidget of his dwarfish foster father had become odious. We never catch this kind of hatred any more than affection at the moment of its beginning. It was always there before. Notice that old is a term of wearied loathing as well as of endearment. At his old tricks, in his old way, the same old thing. It would be absurd to say that Lear is lacking in affection. Insofar as affection is need love, he is half crazy with it. Unless in his own way he loved his daughters, he would not so desperately desire their love. The most unlovable parent or child may be full of such ravenous love, but it works to their own misery and everyone else's. The situation becomes suffocating. If people are already unlovable, a continual demand on their part, as of a right, to be loved, their manifest sense of injury, their approaches, whether loud and clamorous or merely implicit in every look and gesture, or resentful self-pity, produce in us a sense of guilt. They are intended to do so, for a fault we could not have avoided and cannot cease to commit. They seal up the very fountain for which they are thirsty. If ever at some favoured moment any germ of affection for them stirs in us, their demand for more and still more petrifies us again. And of course, such people always desire the same proof of our love. We are to join their side, to hear and share their grievance against someone else. If my boy really loved me, he would see how selfish his father is. If my brother loved me, he would make a party with me against my sister. If you loved me, you wouldn't let me be treated this way. And all the while they remain unaware of the real road. If you would be loved, be lovable, says Ovid. That cheery old reprobate only meant if you want to attract the girls, you must be attractive. But his maxim has a wider application. The amorist was wiser in his generation than Mr. Pontifex and King Lear. The really surprising thing is not that these insatiable demands made by the unlovable are sometimes made in vain, but that they are so often met. Sometimes one sees a woman's girlhood, youth, and long years of her maturity up to the verge of old age, all spent in tending, obeying, caressing, and perhaps supporting a maternal vampire who can never be caressed and obeyed enough. The sacrifice, but there are two opinions about that, may be beautiful. The old woman who exacts it is not. The built-in or unmerited character of affection thus invites a hideous misinterpretation. So does its ease and informality. We hear a great deal about the rudeness of the rising generation. I am an oldster myself and might be expected to take the oldster's side. But in fact, I've been far more impressed by the bad manners of parents to children than by those of children to parents. Who has not been an embarrassed guest at family meals where the father or mother treated their grown-up offspring with an incivility which, offered to any other young people, would simply have terminated the acquaintance? Dogmatic assertions on matters which the children understand and their elders don't, ruthless interruptions, flat contradictions, ridicule of things the young take seriously, sometimes of their religion, insulting references to their friends, all provide an easy answer to the question, why are they always out? Why do they like every house better than their home? Who does not prefer civility to barbarism? If you asked any of these insufferable people, they are not all parents, of course, why they behaved that way at home, they would reply, oh, hang it all, one comes home to relax. A chap can't be always on his best behaviour. If a man can't be himself in his own home, where can he? Of course, we don't want company manners at home. We're a happy family. We can say anything to one another here. No one minds. We all understand. Once again, it is so nearly true, yet so fatally wrong. Affection is an affair of old clothes and ease, of the unguarded moment, of liberties, which would be ill-bred if we took them with strangers. But old clothes are one thing, to wear the same shirt till it stank would be another. There are proper clothes for a garden party, but the clothes for home must be proper too, in their own different way. The root principle of both is the same, that no one give any kind of preference to himself. But the more public the occasion, the more our obedience to this principle has been taped or formalized. There are rules of good manners. The more intimate the occasion, the less the formalization. But not therefore the less need of courtesy. On the contrary, affection at its best practices a courtesy which is incomparably more subtle, sensitive, and deep than the public kind. In public, a ritual would do. At home, you must have the reality which that ritual represented, or else the deafening triumphs of the greatest egoist present. You must really give no kind of preference to yourself. At a party, it is enough to conceal the preference, hence the old proverb, come live with me and you will know me. Hence a man's familiar manners first reveal the true value of his significantly odious phrase, company or party manners. Those who leave their manners behind them when they come home from the dance or the sherry party have no real courtesy even now. They were merely aping those who had. We can say anything to one another. The truth behind this is that affection at its best can say whatever affection at its best wishes to say, regardless of the rules that govern public courtesy. For affection at its best wishes neither to wound nor to humiliate, nor to domineer. You may address the wife of your bosom as pig when she has inadvertently drunk your cocktail as well as her own. You may roar down the story which your father is telling once too often. You may tease and hoax and banter. You can say, shut up, I want to read. You can do anything in the right tone and at the right moment, the tone and moment which are not intended to and will not hurt. The better the affection, the more unerringly it knows which these are. Every love has its art of love. But the domestic rudesby means something quite different when he claims liberty to say anything. Having a very imperfect sort of affection himself, or perhaps at that moment none, he arrogates to himself the beautiful liberties which only the fullest affection has a right to, or knows how to manage. He then uses them spitefully in obedience to his resentments, or ruthlessly in obedience to his egoism, or at best, stupidly, lacking the art. And all the time he may have a clear conscience. He knows that affection takes liberties. He's taking liberties. Therefore, he concludes, he is being affectionate. Resent anything and he will say that the defect of love is on your side. He is hurt. He has been misunderstood. He then sometimes avenges himself by getting on his high horse and becoming elaborately polite. The implication is, of course, oh, so we are not to be intimate. We are to behave like mere acquaintances. I had hoped, but no matter. Have it your way. This illustrates pettily the difference between intimate and formal courtesy. Precisely what suits the one may be a breach of the other. To be free and easy when you are presented to some eminent stranger is bad manners. To practice formal and ceremonial courtesies at home, public faces in private places, is and is always intended to be bad manners. There is a delicious illustration of really good domestic manners in Tristram Shandy. At a singularly unsuitable moment, Uncle Toby has been holding forth on his favourite theme of fortification. My father, driven for once beyond endurance, violently interrupts. Then he sees his brother's face, the utterly unretaliating face of Toby, deeply wounded, not by the slight to himself, he would never even think of that, but by the slight to the noble art. My father at once repents. There is an apology, a total reconciliation. Uncle Toby, to show how complete is his forgiveness, to show that he is not on his dignity, resumes the lecture on fortification. Excuse me. But we have not yet touched on jealousy. I suppose no one now believes that jealousy is especially connected with erotic love. If anyone does the behaviour of children, employees, and domestic animals, ought soon to undeceive him. Every kind of love, almost every kind of association, is liable to it. The jealousy of affection is closely connected with its reliance on what is old and familiar. So also with the total or relative unimportance for affection of what I call appreciative love. We don't want the old familiar faces to become brighter or more beautiful, the old ways to be changed even for the better, the old jokes and interests to be replaced by exciting novelties. Change is a threat to affection. A brother and sister, or two brothers, for sex here is not at work, grow to a certain age sharing everything. They have read the same comics, climbed the same trees, been pirates or spacemen together, taken up and abandoned stamp collecting at the same moment. Then the dreadful thing happens. One of them flashes ahead, discovers poetry or science or serious music, or perhaps undergoes a religious conversion. His life is flooded with the new interest. The other cannot share it. He is left behind. I doubt whether even the infidelity of a wife or a husband raises a more miserable sense of desertion or a fiercer jealousy than this can sometimes do. It is not yet jealousy of the new friends whom the deserter will soon be making. That will come. At first, it is jealousy of the thing itself, of this science, this music, this God, always called religion or all this religion in some contexts. The jealousy will probably be expressed by ridicule. The new interest is all silly nonsense, contemptibly childish or contemptibly grown up. Or else the deserter is not really interested in it at all. He's showing off, swanking. It's all affectation. Presently, the books will be hidden, the scientific specimens destroyed, the radio forcibly switched off the classical programs. For affection is the most instinctive, in that sense, the most animal of the loves. Its jealousy is proportionately fierce. It snarls and bares its teeth like a dog whose food has been snatched away, and why would it not? Something or someone has snatched away from the child I am picturing his lifelong food, his second self. His world is in ruins. But it is not only children who react thusly. Few things in the ordinary peacetime life of a civilized country are more nearly fiendish than the rancour with which a whole unbelieving family will turn on the new member of it who has become a Christian, or a whole lowbrow family on the one who shows signs of becoming an intellectual. This is not, as I once thought, simply the innate and, as it were, disinterested hatred of darkness for light. A church-going family in which one has gone atheist will not always behave any better. It is the reaction to a desertion, even to robbery. Someone or something has stolen our boy or girl. He who was one of us has become one of them. What right had anybody to do it? He is ours. But once change has thus begun, who knows where it will all end? And we were all so happy and comfortable before, and doing no one any harm. Sometimes a curious double jealousy is felt, or rather two inconsistent jealousies which chase each other around in the sufferer's mind. On the other hand, this is all nonsense, all bloody highbrow nonsense, all canting humbug. But on the other, supposing it can't be, it mustn't be, but just supposing there was something in it, supposing there really were anything in literature or in Christianity, how if the deserter has really entered a new world which the rest of us never suspected? But if so, how unfair? Why him? Why was it never open to us? A chit of a girl, a whippersnapper of a boy, being shown things that are hidden from their elders, and since that is clearly incredible and unendurable, jealousy returns to the hypothesis, all nonsense. Parents in this state are much more comfortably placed than brothers and sisters. Their past is unknown to their children. Whatever the deserter's new world is, they can always claim that they have been through it themselves and come out the other end. It's a phase, they say. It will blow over. Nothing could be more satisfactory. It cannot be there and then refuted, for it's a statement about the future. It stings, yet so indulgently said is hard to resent. Better still, the elders may really believe it. Best of all, it may finally turn out to have been true. It won't be their fault if it doesn't. I'm so sorry. Boy, these wild courses of yours will break your mother's heart. That eminently Victorian appeal may have often been true. Affection was bitterly wounded when one member of the family fell from the homely ethos into something worse. Gambling, drinking, keeping an opera girl. Unfortunately, it's almost equally possible to break your mother's heart by rising above the homely ethos. The conservative tenacity of affection works both ways. It can be a domestic counterpart to that nationally suicidal type of education, which keeps back the promising child because the idlers and the dunces might be hurt if it were undemocratically moved into a higher class than themselves. All these perversions of affection are mainly connected with affection as a need love. But affection as a gift love has its perversions too. Sorry. I am thinking of Mrs. Fidget, who died a few months ago. This is quite sad, I remember this. It is really astonishing how her family have brightened up now. The drawn look has gone from her husband's face. He begins to be able to laugh. The younger boy, whom I had always thought an embittered, peevish little creature, turns out to be quite human. The elder, who was hardly ever at home except when he was in bed, is nearly always there now and has begun to reorganize the garden. The girl, who was always supposed to be delicate, though I never found out what exactly the trouble was, now has the riding lessons which were once out of the question, dances all night and plays any amount of tennis. Even the dog, who was never allowed out except on a lead, is now a well-known member of the Lamppost Club in their road. Mrs. Fidget very often said that she lived for her family, and it was not untrue. Everyone in the neighbourhood knew it. She lives for her family, they said. What a wife and mother. She did all the washing, true, she did it badly, and they could have afforded to send it out to a laundry, and they frequently begged her not to do it, but she did. There was always a hot lunch for anyone who was at home and always a hot meal at night, even in midsummer. They implored her not to provide this. They protested almost with tears in their eyes and with truth that they liked cold meals. Made no difference. She was living for her family. She always set up to welcome you home if you were out late at night, 2 or 3 in the morning. It made no odds. You would always find the frail, pale, weary face awaiting you, like a silent accusation. Which meant, of course, that you couldn't, with any decency, go out very often. She was always making things too, being, in her own estimation, I'm no judge myself, and an excellent amateur dressmaker and a great knitter. And of course, unless you were a heartless brute, you had to wear the things. The vicar tells me that since her death, the contributions of that family alone to sales of work outweigh those of all his other parishioners put together. And then her care for their health. She bore the whole burden of that daughter's delicacy alone. The doctor, an old friend, and it was not being done on national health, was never allowed to discuss matters with his patient. After the briefest examination of her, he was taken into another room by the mother. The girl was to have no worries, no responsibility for her own health, only loving care, caresses, special foods, horrible tonic wines, and breakfast in bed. For Mrs. Fidget, as she so often said, would work her fingers to the bone for her family. They couldn't stop her, nor could they, being decent people, quite sit still and watch her do it. They had to help. Indeed, they were always having to help. That is, they did things for her to help her do things for them, which they didn't want done. As for the dear dog, it was to her, she said, just like one of the children. It was, in fact, as like one of them as she could make it. But since it had no scruples, it got on rather better than they, and though vetted, dieted, and guarded within an inch of its life, contrived sometimes to reach the dustbin or the dog next door. The vicar says Mrs. Fidget is now at rest. Let us hope she is. What's quite certain is that her family are. It's easy to see how liability to this state is, so to speak, congenital in the maternal instinct. This, as we saw, is a gift love, but one that needs to give, therefore needs to be needed. But the proper aim of giving is to put the recipient in a state where he no longer needs our gift. We feed children in order that they may soon be able to feed themselves. We teach them in order that they may soon not need our teaching. Thus, a heavy task is laid upon the gift love. It must work towards its own abdication. We must aim at making ourselves superfluous. The hour when we can say they need me no longer should be our reward, but the instinct, simply in its own nature, has no power to fulfill this law. The instinct desires the good of its object, but not simply, only the good it can give itself. A much higher love, a love which desires the good of the object as such, from whatever source that good comes, must step in and help or tame the instinct before it can make the abdication. And of course it often does. But where it does not, the ravenous need to be needed will gratify itself either by keeping its objects needy or by inventing for them imaginary needs. It will do this all the more ruthlessly because it thinks, in one sense truly, that it is a gift love and therefore regards itself as unselfish. It is not only mothers who can do this. All those other affections which, whether by derivation from parental instinct or by similarity of function, need to be needed may fall into the same pit. The affections of patron for protege is one. In Jane Austen's novel, Emma intends that Harriet Smith should have a happy life, but only the sort of happy life which Emma herself had planned for her. My own profession, that of university teacher, is in this way dangerous. If we are any good, we must always be working towards the moment at which our pupils are fit to become our critics and rivals. We should be delighted when it arrives, as the fencing master is delighted when his pupil can pink and disarm him, and many are, but not all. I'm old enough to remember the sad case of Dr. Quartz. No university boasted a more effective or devoted teacher. He made an indelible impression on nearly all of his pupils. He was the object of much well-merited hero worship. Naturally and delightfully, they continued to visit him after the tutorial relation had ended. Went round to his house of an evening and had famous discussions. But the curious thing is that this never lasted. Sooner or later, it may have been months or even weeks, came the fatal evening when they knocked on his door and were told the doctor was engaged. After that, he would always be engaged. They were banished forever. This was because, at their last meeting, they had rebelled. They had asserted their independence, differed from the master, and supported their own view, perhaps not without success. Faced with the very dependence he had laboured to produce, Dr. Quartz could not bear it. Wotan had toiled to create the free Siegfried. Presented with the free Siegfried, he was enraged. This terrible need to be needed often finds its outlet in pampering an animal. To learn that someone is fond of animals tells us very little until we know in which way. For there are two ways. On the one hand, the higher and domesticated animal is, so to speak, a bridge between us and the rest of nature. We all at times feel somewhat painfully our human isolation, from the subhuman world. The atrophy of instinct, which our intelligence entails, our excessive self-consciousness, the innumerable complexities of our situation. If only we could shuffle it all off. We must not, and incidentally we cannot, become beasts, but we can be with a beast. It is personal enough to give the word with a real meaning, yet it remains very largely an unconscious little bundle of biological impulses. It has three legs in nature's world and one in ours. It is a link, an ambassador. Who would not wish to have a representative at the court of Pan? Man with dog closes a gap in the universe, but of course animals are often used in a worse fashion. If you need to be needed, and if your family very properly decline to need you, a pet is the obvious substitute. You can keep it all its life in need of you. You can keep it permanently infantile, reduce it to permanent invalidism, cut it off from all genuine animal well-being, and compensate for this by creating needs for countless indulgences which only you can grant. The unfortunate creature thus becomes very useful to the rest of the household. It acts as a sump or a drain. You're too busy spoiling a dog's life to spoil theirs. Dogs are better for this purpose than cats. A monkey, I am told, is best of all. Also, it is more like the real thing. To be sure, it's all very bad luck for the animal, but probably it cannot fully realise the wrong you've done. Better still, you would never know if it did. The most downtrodden human, driven too far, may one day turn and blurt out a terrible truth. Animals cannot speak. Those who say, the more I see of men, the better I like dogs. Those who find in animals a relief from the demands of human companionship will be well advised to examine the real reason. I hope I am not being misunderstood. If this leads anyone to doubt that the lack of natural affection is an extreme depravity, then I have failed. Nor do I question for a moment that affection is responsible for 9/10 of whatever solid and durable happiness there is in our natural lives. I shall therefore have some sympathy with those whose comment on the last few pages takes the form, of course, these things do happen. Selfish or neurotic people can twist anything, even love, into some sort of misery or exploitation. But why stress these marginal cases? A little common sense, a little give and take prevents their occurrence among decent people. But I think this comment itself needs commentary. Firstly, as to neurotic, I do not think we shall see things more clearly by classifying all these malefical states of affection as pathological. No doubt there are really pathological conditions which make the temptation to these states abnormally hard. Send those people to the doctors by all means, but I believe that everyone who is honest with himself will admit that he has felt these temptations. Their occurrence is not a disease, or if it is, the name of that disease is being a fallen man. In ordinary people, the yielding to them, and who does not sometimes yield, is not disease but sin. Spiritual direction will help us more than medical treatment. Medicine labours to restore natural structure or normal function, but greed, egoism, self-deception and self-pity are not unnatural or abnormal in the same sense as a floating kidney or astigmatism. For who in heaven's name would describe as natural or normal the man from whom these failings were wholly absent? Natural, if you like, in a quite different sense. Arch-natural, unfallen. We have seen only one such man, and he was not at all like the psychologist's picture of the integrated, balanced, adjusted, happily married, employed, popular citizen. You can't really be very well adjusted to your world if it says you have a devil and ends by nailing you up naked to a stake of wood. But secondly, the comment in its own language admits the very thing I am trying to say. Affection produces happiness if and only if there is common sense and give and take and decency. In other words, only if something more and other than affection is added. The mere feeling is not enough. You need common sense, that is reason. You need give and take, that is, you need justice. Continually stimulating mere affection when it fades and restraining it when it forgets or would defy the art of love. You need decency. There is no disguising the fact that this means goodness, patience, self-denial, humility, and the continual intervention of a far higher sort of love than affection in itself can ever be. That is the whole point. If we try to live by affection alone, affection will go bad on us. How bad, I believe, we seldom recognise. Can Mrs. Fidget really have been quite unaware of the countless frustrations and miseries she inflicted on her family? It passes belief. She knew. Of course she knew that it spoiled your whole evening to know that when you came home you would find her uselessly, accusingly sitting up for you. She continued all these practices because if she dropped them, she would have been faced with the fact she was determined not to see. Would have known that she was not necessary. This is the first motive. Then, too, the very laboriousness of her life silenced her secret doubts as to the quality of her love. The more her feet burned and her back ached, the better. For this pain whispered in her ear, how much I must love them if I do all of this. That is the second motive. But I think there's a lower depth, the unappreciativeness of the others, those terrible, wounding words. Anything will wound a Mrs. Fidget, in which they begged her to send the washing out, enabled her to feel ill-used, therefore to have a continual grievance, to enjoy the pleasures of resentment. If anyone says he does not know those pleasures, he is a liar or a saint. It is true that they are pleasures only to those who hate, but then a love like Mrs. Fidget's contains a good deal of hatred. It was of erotic love that the Roman poet said, I love and hate. But other kinds of love admit the same mixture. They carry in them the seeds of hatred. If affection is made the absolute sovereign of a human life, the seeds will germinate. Love, having become a god, becomes a demon. That's your lot. That's it. I've got 0 minutes, actually. I've got 1 minute until I have to be somewhere else. But if anyone, I don't know, wants to ask a question, that's fine. If not, don't feel bad. I'll still feel tenderly affectionate towards most of you. All of you. I realise there's a delay, but my nose is going to fall off if I don't blow it, so I'm also getting off for that reason. Hi, Cherokee. Okay. All right, then. I apologise for breaking up your little chat, but I'm going to end this now. And that's lovely. Thank you. Okay, so I don't know if you're in here. Jeff, I'll literally see you any second. Also, I don't know if Jordan's here or Armour or Chuck or anyone, but yep, I'll be over momentarily. All right. Oh, you're very welcome, John. Anybody who is a member or like on pause as a member or on Patreon or PayPal, please get Skype and find me on there, Soko Films, and Cherokee you as well. Obviously, it goes without saying, because we've got a little group thing, and I'm going to do a little live stream, if that's even a word for it, there now. So I don't want to keep them waiting, and yeah, lots of love, and I will, or lots of affection, whatever you like. I'm going to do the other 3 loves maybe after I just, like, I don't know, get my act together and I'm able to read for more than half an hour without like choking on my own the stuff in my nose. Anywho, literally just rambling now. So I hate goodbyes. That's my problem. All right, so I'll press the first button and I'll say, like, thanks for being with me with my first live stream for a while, and see you tomorrow. Bye.